Morning, folks. This is House Corrections and Institutions Committee. It is Wednesday, March 11th, and this is our 8:30 meeting, starting a little late. We're back working on H 550, and we're in section 7, which is dealing with the PREA issue in terms of trying to codify the PREA standards. And yesterday we talked about a couple versions, and we have before us two separate versions. And Charlie, I hope you have these. One is how we want to keep in the standards. Did we really decide to take out all the standards? I think we wanted two versions. One was with no standards whatsoever, which is this version here, which just deals that we would adopt the PREA that was in effect January 1st, 24, and that on or before January 15th of next year, DOC would submit a report to us. Doesn't say on what, and that DOC would adopt policies to implement.
Draft 1.4.
There's two versions.
This is 1.4, yeah, with
This is
yellow
1.4.
highlights. Yeah.
There's two versions.
And what's the other one referred to as?
1.4. They're both 1.4.
They're both 1.4.
You got two versions.
Only one is posted.
There's an internal edits and then there's a clean.
What she did, yeah.
So
No, I just uploaded it, so it's taking a second.
I'm perfectly capable of missing it.
it is just you.
Yeah, I thought also we were talking about also keeping in all the standards, right? Or not?
I thought only me. Last word was we were going to drop all the numbered stuff.
Standards?
Yeah.
And we were gonna hear from,
Yep.
Right, so there's two versions in terms of how you drop the standards. One is you actually delete line by line all the standards, or you just do a clean version that doesn't even refer to that. So Charlie, on the network, I think we want to just your experience with PREA in terms of what you see in your work with women or folks who are incarcerated. And also if you could weigh in terms of what, if we should codify adopting and complying with the PREA of January 1st, 2024, or if it should be different. Perfect. Right. So I'm turning it over to you. If you could introduce yourself for the record.
Good morning, Charlie Glisserman. I'm the policy director at the Vermont Network Against Domestic and Sexual Violence, and appreciate you all having me in to speak to Section 7 of H 550. We really appreciate the committee's commitment to protecting Vermonters from sexual violence in correctional facilities. And as you know, if people who are incarcerated experience a heightened risk of sexual abuse and misconduct, Vermont is not immune from these realities. Protecting individual safety in state custody is a core responsibility of our government. The Federal Prison Rape Elimination Act was created to further that principle and recognizes that when the state incarcerates someone, it assumes control over that person's environment and with it a heightened duty to protect them from harm. And that duty extends equally to Department of Corrections staff who work in these facilities every day. A bit of background on PREA and the network's interaction with PREA in Vermont. In 2003, PREA was created and passed with unanimous bipartisan support in the US Congress. In 2013, the Vermont DOC began implementing the federal PREA standards. States were required to collaborate with their federally recognized sexual violence coalition in that process, which is the Vermont Network. So we worked closely with DOC to develop policies and procedures until 2015, when DOC did achieve its federal PREA certification. So today, this partnership continues through the Vermont Network's DIVAS program, which Kylan, our director of DIVAS, and I testified to in this committee in, I think, early February, maybe late January. And that DVIS program provides confidential support services to people who are incarcerated in Vermont's correctional facilities, including people who experience sexual harm while incarcerated. Vermont has invested years into strengthening prevention and response to sexual violence in correctional facilities. We see codifying PREA standards at the state level as a way to maintain and continue that progress. In December 2025, the DOJ issued a memo announcing its intent to revise federal PREA standards to align with the executive order on gender ideology extremism. And that rulemaking is in progress. In the interim, PREA auditors were instructed to ignore standards that protect transgender and intersex people who face disproportionately high rates of sexual violence in custody. Last year, the DOJ also made significant funding cuts to the National PREA Resource Center. That's the primary source of support for states in training, technical assistance, and corrective action on PREA. Funding changes at the center also interrupted trainings for DOJ certified auditors. There was already a shortage of auditors, and this just further compromised compliance work on PREA. So within a short time, there have been some pretty significant shifts to PREA that will compromise incarcerated people's safety. Codifying PREA at the state level is a necessary step to preserving stability and accountability, regardless of who holds federal office or how federal agencies shift their priorities. Through this codification, Vermont will express its commitment to the protection and safety of individuals who are incarcerated and those who work in correctional facilities. There is certainly more work to be done to ensure that incarcerated people are fully protected from sexual violence. And in the future, this may include further legislation on PREA compliance and enforcement at the state level. But we see H550 as a way to continue to move forward, not fall back. Speaking to the questions raised in yesterday's hearing around listing out the standards and the contents of the report, on listing the standards, the direct effect of the law will be the same, whether the PREA standards are explicitly listed or incorporated by reference. We do support listing them in statute when possible. We see this as a way to really clearly communicate legislative intent. And it also helps Vermonters understand the protections that are available to them and their loved ones if they look at the statute. On the report contents, we do support maintaining some level of detail within 550 regarding the contents of DOC's annual report. These reporting requirements should align with current DOC federal PREA reporting to reduce administrative burden and preserve consistency. Thank you again for your commitment to this issue and time. I would be happy to answer any questions.
So I just want a little background for the committee members. I think when we think of the PREA Prison Rape Elimination Act, we're thinking more of women who are incarcerated being in a situation with sexual misconduct, male on female or female on male. PREA is across our DOC system, so it would also protect our male incarcerated folks as well, which could be female staff on male incarcerated individuals, male incarcerated on female staff, or male on male or female on male. Correct?
Absolutely.
So it goes across the whole board. So I don't want folks to just think this is just dealing with a Chittenden facility and just dealing with women and men, that it's all throughout the whole system and all forms of sexual misconduct.
Mhm.
I just want to make sure folks are really clear about that.
That's absolutely right. And if you look at the DOC website on PREA, it does have some aggregated sexual abuse data and analysis that could just be helpful to the committee for context around what kinds of sexual violence occurred and where in the DOC facilities it occurred, and it occurs across the facilities.
And it could be inmate on inmate, could be
Yes.
staff on staff, could be
Yes.
inmate on staff, could be staff on inmate. Also volunteers coming into the facility as well. What about visitors? Yeah. Does PRIA extend to any of that?
That's a good question. I don't know the answer to that.
It's curious. So my other question is, on the report back, the new version that we have, the old version on the report back, it's out, had a listing of detailed information that should be included. And one version that we have, well, both versions, eliminates that. So if you read the current draft that's before us, on B, on or before January 15th of next year, DOC would submit a report to us. And that's what it says. So what's in the report? When I read that, I'm thinking, well, what are they going to be reporting back? Because we have proposed to take out detailing information. So, right.
I was just gonna answer your question. It does pertain to visitors. PRIA. Yes, if it pertains to visitors, it does.
Okay. Troy?
Is it enough, in your estimation, to simply state that DOC will share any PRIA reporting due to the federal government with the state committees?
Could you repeat that, Troy?
Is it enough to just in statute state that the DOC will share any reporting PRIA reporting due to the federal government with
us?
our committees or joint justice or whatever, yeah.
I think that it would be helpful to specify that the contents of the report mirror what DOC provides currently
Right.
in their PRIA report.
Fine. Yeah.
We don't know how PRIA reporting will change. I certainly don't want to increase administrative burden on the Department of Corrections. If the intent is to codify like current practices in PRIA, then I think that is most appropriate and should be reflected both in the standards and the reporting language.
So you don't know right now what DOC does report back to the feds on the PRIA?
I do know that there is analysis that is reported that I think is comparable to what was listed in that 1 through 3. We did hear from DOC staff that that does not necessarily mirror up with what they are providing. And so I would be curious if the Department of Corrections perhaps had some language suggestions to make sure that it does mirror what they're providing already.
Folks?
Yeah, I guess.
Brian?
I feel like when you described the reasoning for the 2 bullet points on page 2 of the testimony, the first one listing the standards, the second one listing the reporting requirements, your explanations for the reasons were a little bit different. And so for the first bullet point, it was sort of so Vermonters know what's covered or know their rights or some such.
Mhm.
I guess I'm trying to figure out the concern for both of them. Is it that things are changing at the federal level? We greatly prefer how things are now to what we imagine they will be. I guess, is it enough to point to what's going on for both the reporting and what's in there? And you sort of already answered that for the first bullet point, like, no, we would like, what's the. Would just saying that the reporting needs to be what it currently is under 28 CFR 115, is that enough? And if not, what's the reason? Are we afraid that it's going to change? Is it so people know what things are being reported on or some combination?
I think that could absolutely be enough if reporting is what DOC is providing for an annual report is tied to their reporting standards as of I think it's January 1, 2024. I think that I think that is possibly a good option. As far as listing the PREA standards as of 2024 in statute, I agree. I think in practice and the intent is to codify the standards as of that January 1, 2024. Our kind of reasoning for why you might want to put standards in the statute as well is because sometimes survivors or family members of survivors do come to us with a state statute in hand and ask us, how does it protect them? And they are doing their own research. We often see survivors who are representing themselves in court. And so when I think about how we are writing statutes, I sometimes think of those kinds of people and want to make sure that maybe if you don't know how to look up a federal reference statute, you might still be able to get a sense of what is this statute really doing for me and my loved ones to protect us. If that is a helpful explanation.
No, totally is. Yeah. And then that draws, for me at least, I think a distinction between the two bullets that this example, these folks would look for what's covered, but not necessarily how or what is reported on. So that, yeah, for me at least distinguishes it. Thanks.
Thank you.
Yeah.
So Charlie, are you aware of any situation when you're talking about listing the standards specifically and how helpful it is for the person who's been violated to refer to this and have something action in hand? Are you aware of any situations with the Prisoners' Rights Office that we haven't reached out to them, but the Prisoners' Rights Office quite often is there representing either family members of folks who are incarcerated or the incarcerated person as well? They must encounter PREA issues as well. Are you aware of any of that?
I am not as familiar, but I'm happy to connect with Vermont Network staff who are more familiar, and I can follow up by email on that.
I mean, that might be worth us kind of asking the Prisoners' Rights Office as well. Because a lot of situations that occur with folks who are incarcerated, family members will work with the Prisoners' Rights Office, or even those incarcerated folks will.
I think that's a great point.
Could you reach out to the Prisoners' Rights Office is through the Defender General's office, and see if there's anyone in the Prisoners' Rights Office, I don't know who the head of that is anymore, would weigh in on this.
Yeah.
Because that's another legal avenue that folks have, but I'm sure PREA would be at play. Sean?
So just to be clear, Charlie, so you're advocating to don't strike all that
Yeah,
stuff out
keep
of
the
there.
standards.
I think that the direct effect of the law would be the same either way, but our preference would be to include them.
Because it's kind of like it's belt and suspenders. Got it.
And it's easier for the public to really see what's in PREA instead of having to go to the federal level to figure
Yeah.
it out.
This leaves a lot to this,
And these people leave different, agencies. Are their predecessors, are their new folks going to realize this?
So DOC wasn't really supportive of listing out the standards per se. But these standards that are listed, 1 through 44 are all the standards that are in the PREA dated January 1st, 2024.
That's my understanding, yes.
This just reflects in statute what is in the 2024 PREA and the national standards. Sean and then Brian.
I mean, I know we just, Connor said it yesterday, but I think what he said was really hit me because it was like, yeah, maybe John's on board now and he's okay with it. But like, what happens when someone comes in who's buying into what's going on in the government right now and says there aren't transgender people? So if it's written in there, it's written in there and it has more meat. So anyway, I'd like to.
Thanks, Sean. That means a lot.
Yes.
He doesn't deserve the cheese. Brian?
No. So there were a few minutes of testimony from the DOC corner yesterday afternoon when we were talking about this. And they were arguing against the January 1st, 2024 date. But I didn't get the impression that it was in the same vein as them worried. They were worried about being handcuffed or worried about extra administrative work. I'm trying to get my head around it. So whatever happens, whatever changes occur at the federal level, suppose they strike these standards entirely. Can you still refer in the wake of that to 28 CFR Part 115? Do you need the date? What if a good update happens in 2025, for instance? Do you remember this testimony? Yeah.
So the commissioner kind of weighed that, said that to me as well. Why lock it into 2024? We're going to continue what we're doing anyway, regardless of any changes that occur on the federal level. Which I know he would do.
I know.
But Mary has also put out, we have different commissioners over time, administrations change. And I thought maybe we could have a review process in a couple of years in terms of, do we update that date to if another one is promulgated that is better? And we have a review in a couple of years.
Do we also then require reporting per 28 CFR 115 as of 1/1/24?
The reporting in terms of,
Not just listing those things that are PREA.
yeah, but
Describing how they must report. And then we lock that in amber too.
we lock that in.
Because if the federal government decides that they no longer need states to report, we still won't.
We still want the report.
But do we want them doing that anyway? Does that approach of freezing 1/1/24 for the reporting as it is either lead to missing information or to duplication of effort? Yeah.
Once it's to Hillary.
Yeah, I think it's a great question for affirmative corrections and legislative council. I mean, my understanding was that the DOC staff didn't feel like there was exact alignment between the reporting language in here and as of the last draft and what they are currently required to provide for federal PREA. So I guess that's part of the question too, and that's why there might be additional administrative burden if those diverge in any way.
Yeah.
Troy.
Yeah, are you on that line? I guess.
Yeah, it's quick.
Yeah, go.
And I understand, I too want to minimize duplicative administrative burdens. Nonetheless, I think it's okay if we ask for information that requires administration, right? I mean, just because people say this is going to be an administrative burden isn't enough for me to say, okay, fine, we'll strike it. Do your work, right? That it's okay for us to ask.
But they already have to report to.
Right, yeah, but
Anyway.
in this
The
event,
question is, do we ask them to report more?
well, in this event, right now, I would say no, right now. Because the federal requirements, I guess it's not as quick, Connor, because the federal requirements are sufficient, right? They're going to give us what we want. That could change. If that changes and that change requires more administration from the DOC, I'm okay with asking for them to administrate nonetheless.
So would that play in again to having a review in a couple of years?
Yeah.
Yeah.
In terms even of what's reported to us, that we keep, to say that we say, okay, right now, for the next 2 years, they report back to us in terms of what they're reporting back to the feds. Why would we? But we're gonna review this in 2 years.
Yeah.
I don't know if you do that through a sunset or you can do different language. Maybe that's not a sunset. I don't know. But it's a check-in 2 years.
So three words are nagging at me a little bit in this, right? And I know the justification for them within available appropriations is put in.
Yeah.
Because we don't want the perception that we're binding the administration for future years there, which is where we got the sticky situation with the veto and everything. At the same time, take those three words within available appropriations and use them with some of the bullet points down there. You know, we couldn't train our staff because we didn't have enough money.
Yeah.
You know, we couldn't do this reporting because we didn't have enough money. Department of Corrections never has enough money. So are those three words a blanket get out of jail free card for not complying with any of these bullets in there? It's,
Yes, they are. Yes, they are.
I think so. It gets them off the hook for anything,
Yeah.
right? Yeah.
Well, at the very least, you strike them, you butt heads over the, you know, the territorial contest.
Yes, I wonder if there's another way to say it. I mean, we do, like, it's not uncommon for us to have mandates for, you know, the executive branch to follow.
So, Charlie, can you go over again the dates when they were adopted? Because if you took out within available appropriation, DOC shall adopt and comply with PREA.
When the dates of when kind of PREA was
Yeah,
passed,
The background, in
Yes.
2003, PREA was created.
it was created,
In 2013,
Vermont began implementing the federal PREA standards and then was certified in that they had federal PREA certification in 2015. And, you know, it's my understanding that those, PREA national standards have been periodically updated. And so despite Vermont achieving that federal certification in 2015, that's not necessarily where we would want to tie ourselves.
to that 2015
Correct. Yes, I'm sure that it has changed plenty since then.
But states were required to collaborate with their federally recognized sexual violence coalitions.
Mhm.
So that would be you
Us.
folks.
Yes.
Are states required to incorporate PREA, DOC? States, are they being required by the feds to incorporate PREA in their
So
practices?
I'm not an expert. What I know is that I think the majority of states are either in compliance with PREA or are making, I forget the status, like substantial steps to be in compliance with PREA. And the kind of some of the teeth behind not being in compliance with PREA is impacts to funding for sexual violence work.
Which punctuates Connor's point all the more.
Yeah, that's what I was trying to play through. So if we eliminate it within available appropriations, how does that really play out?
For me, if we strike those three words and I'm moving towards that, it essentially sends the message that Vermont intends to be PREA compliant regardless whether or not PREA is a thing or whether or not funding from the feds is a thing. We still hold these standards to be important for how we do corrections in Vermont. So, yeah.
Like, we don't ask DEC to test water quality within available appropriations.
Right.
That's their job. This is the job to make sure people don't get like sexually assaulted in prison, right? It's their job. It's-
Size.
Where are we as a committee? Of course, DOC is not in the room here, but where are we as a committee? Are we headed to
Kill those three.
kill them
How about
and keep the standards listed?
that?
Yep,
Yep.
we are.
That's where I am.
That's where I was, yes.
We're catching up to Mary. Mary's so quick.
Are folks who are silent okay with that?
Yes.
Kev.
I don't know if I'm or not.
I'm no on the whole thing,
Oh, you are.
Yeah, well, we figured that.
because we're putting good money after bad. We need to solve the root cause. Nobody should be fearful in prison. Whether you're transgender, gay, small, blue eyes, that's where we should be putting our money, not in more reporting, et cetera. I hate the concept of any individual being fearful for their safety in prison. That's what we should be solving.
But I think those are false premises.
Yeah, because PREA does protect folks from being victimized.
This is just another Band-Aid on a bleeding body.
So Kevin, I am happy, and I mean this sincerely, to have you join the struggle for ending transphobic violence. 100%. The truth of the matter is transphobic violence exists in society and is heightened in incarcerative settings. So this is that. This is fighting transphobic violence. This is putting teeth behind actions that seek to end transphobic violence in corrections, which is our purview. So I'm grateful to hear that you're in it for that fight. And I am convinced that this is part of that fight.
Just to clarify, we're talking about the instituting the 44 standards.
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, yeah, I'm not okay with it. It's just over prescriptive. But you don't need.
If we can't implement body cams on correctional officers so that we know what's going on inside the activities, we can write rules all day long and it's not going to be effective. We need to have control of what's going on inside. That's where we should be putting more money rather than trying to report on what we can't control.
Well, but inability to overrule labor law doesn't mean you should throw up your hands about any of it.
But
I agree with that. But we should, but we need to have the same great
Oh.
enthusiasm that you
I'll
have for
join you
this.
in
Little
getting
tiny,
Pam that debate.
this little
Yeah.
tiny bit of population on the whole population. That's what I'm saying.
Well, this does.
PREA doesn't.
The whole population.
I agree, but that's not.
I mean, that was the
This
point in the beginning of the
provides safety
conversation. It's for
within-
everybody.
This is to provide safety within our correctional facility for everyone who is in that facility, staff, inmates, volunteers, anyone coming in. This is to provide safety and security within that facility, exactly what Kevin wants, that it should not be a place where people are preyed upon.
Correct.
But this is a tool to prevent that from happening. This is a tool. I'm not even looking at the report back. I'm just looking at that first section in terms of codifying it and being very clear in what standards everyone in DOC needs to comply with. So Joe and then Sean's and Brian.
the other piece that I missed, but I would agree that striking the within available appropriations language is appropriate here. So I mean, I had dissented on a bill last year for children apart. What's the
Kids apart.
Kids
Yeah.
apart, excuse me. But that's different because I would perceive that as more of a nice thing to have, but it's discretionary. Whereas this really isn't discretionary. You know, this is not discretionary work on the Department of Corrections.
Well, it hasn't been for 12 years.
Precisely, so that it should not be within available appropriations. I think Connor's analogy is valid in this case. So I'm fine with that piece of it. I just think that putting 44, how many?
44.
44 different standards there, it's a bit much.
Sean and then Brian and then James. and then-
I'm at that point.
Mhm.
If we choose this for all of our statutes, you're gonna almost double the green books. Because you can't reiterate everything. I mean, that's the way law is written, is you refer to statute or the act or the section. You don't rewrite it every time you use it. That's not a practical way to. Now, I'm not against having it in here because you're trying to get the belts and suspenders, but the practicality of doing it this way, we don't generally write law that.
There are times we do list out requirements in statute, departments, in agencies.
Oh, sorry.
Oh, go ahead.
If I may, Paul, as I noted, the direct effect of the law will be the same, whether these standards are listed or not. I do think that because part of the intent of this bill is to codify kind of current practices that are and may continue to shift, that's perhaps a distinction between other types of statutory references. I also just wanted to note that, PREA is in part about sexual violence response, but I feel like the core of it is really about sexual violence prevention. If you look at these standards, things like specialized training for employees and volunteers about zero tolerance for sexual violence and sexual harassment in correctional facilities, mental health treatment, these kinds of standards and the teeth that come with them really result in detailed prevention, treatment, and staff understanding and volunteer understanding around what the standards are, which I think is really helpful in stopping violence before it starts. I also think that the data collection and review requirements within the PREA standards are also quite helpful in analyzing problems so that they can take corrective action and be prevented in the future. So just something to consider too around, no level of sexual violence in a correctional facility is acceptable. I don't think that we should accept that as a reality. And one way to do that is to, codify some of the prevention tools that we currently have.
John and Brian and James.
So to go a little deeper, Charlie,
Mhm.
that's what I was getting at.
Mhm.
And so has PREA after its inaction or its action that when they put it into law in 2004, you said, right? 2003,
Federal law.
has it made a difference?
It's absolutely made a difference. As far as like the kind of the real data to express that, I don't have that at my hands, but it was a massive, massive step forward for Vermont and for the country.
Okay.
Brian and then James.
I don't think we have yet addressed the second bullet point and how specific we want to be when we're talking about reporting. And maybe I should just let that sit for a little while and we'll get to it later. But I'm also hoping, and I'm sure you and Tate are all over it, but that we're going to have Josh and Jen back in here. And maybe they can talk to us about
We need
it's
to.
important to have
The commissioner.
January 24th. Yes, yeah, but the PREA team too.
PREA team.
The whole.
Team here. That's our goal for tomorrow, for sure. Oh, James.
I was just gonna say, I'm personally ambivalent as to whether or not they're listed or not. But just for the people who are concerned, even though we've said this multiple times, that whether they're listed or not, they are listed in the actual law that is being referenced, so they still exist. So, and that's not me saying take them out. That's me saying regardless if they're in or out, they exist and they're still being referenced and they still have to be met. And referencing the specific January 1st, 2020 standard, I agree with Alice about coming back in a couple of years to review it, but that gives you a baseline of, if something in the meantime becomes less strict, if you will, then the state, which I don't think they would do anyway, can't go and say, oh, we're going to be less strict too. And so that's my input that everybody else has kind of shared and has different, mostly the same feelings, I guess, on, but that's my input.
Mary?
I feel it's an appropriate time to have this in where DOC is doing their plan that should be done in a couple of weeks or whatever, that this does look to starting off fresh with this complete piece with what they're working on and this going forward. So I don't have a problem listing it. I think that it just puts it together and especially being so respectful of DOC's, you know, going forth with their plan as well. This just puts it together.
The other thing too, that I hadn't thought about, so I appreciate Charlie, you mentioning this. And that's what triggered in me, the Prisoners' Rights Office, to think about this, is by actually listing the standards in statute. Helps the common person who's not used to reading statute to know what is laid out. And they can be very, very clear that yes, when they're going to the Prisoners' Rights Office, or they're going to the network, or even they're talking to a lawyer to say something happened, they can go right down the line and just say, there were different gender viewing and searches. They can articulate particularly where, if it's not in statute, they're not going to know where to go, because most people have no clue what 23 CFR Part 115 in a federal document is. Most people don't even know what 28 VSA is. So if it's laid out specifically, the standards are laid out specifically, it really helps the common person, the layman person, to support their family member who's incarcerated. And it provides a protection. It provides a protection to the person who's incarcerated, but it also provides a protection for the staff. Because the staff quite often is accused by inmates of inappropriate behavior. And this gives backup to VSCA by laying out the standards and statute. And it gives backup to our correctional officers, our administrative staff, and a lot of the volunteers who are coming in by listing the standards and statute. It provides a lot of protection for folks who are involved in DOC. So that part of your testimony really resonated with me because I had not thought about that. I just want to put that on the table. Because we need to protect folks in the whole DOC system, all the folks. It protects our medical providers in the DOC system. We contract for them. And it might even protect, I'm not sure about this because you said it does protect visitors. A lot of our folks are transported by our local ambulance services, our EMT folks. And there could be some abuse occurring there.
I think the clarity is very helpful.
Yeah, I just want to maybe loop back to Sean's question, and like, I don't know if we have the data for PREA, but I can just say, having, you know, represented correctional officers and seeing PREA implemented, it created a culture change, you know, and I think Vermont was already ahead of the curve there. But nationally in corrections, you know, this was something that was in the shadows, right? Like sexual assaults in prison. I have the understanding, like, you went in the clink, you know, whatever happened, happened. And DOC, you know, it's just nationwide, not here necessarily, would look to cover that up, you know, they'd look to cover that up. So I think, and I'm trying to bring Kevin on board here too, I think what PREA does, in a sense, is give us all the information we need to make an intelligent decision of where to invest to prevent this from happening. But without that data, with the reporting requirements and bringing that out into the open, it's really hard to do. So I think it's just a crucial step, you know, to avoid this type of stuff happening. And DOC, you know, has a PREA staffer that came on board after the national law was there. And that staffer is Heather Simons, I think it was originally there.
Right.
But that's the person's only job, is to think of this stuff. So that's why I'm thinking it's so important to have this stuff just ingrained in state statute.
In industry, we had the saying, and it's real, you get what you measure.
Mhm.
So I agree. If we
Yep.
could measure this accurately,
Yeah.
then we could manage it. But we admit right up front, we can't manage it accurately. If we manage it, if we could measure it, then we should immediately eliminate it. The hearsay and the he said, she said would go away, but we're not targeting how to get accurate measurements. We're just
I think-
threatening those who are involved that if they do thus and so, we're going to nail you. Instead of giving them the tools to eliminate that risk. If we knew we were getting full reporting,
Mhm.
then we could address the root cause of the problem rather than generally scaring the population to think about it. If you knew someone was raping someone in prison, they go, they're gone. In fact, you prosecute them. But the fact that we have to put all of this language together with the hopes that we're going to scare people into thinking about it more doesn't solve the problem, is what I'm saying.
But I think like at that point, it's looking for patterns, you know, and sometimes it's whack-a-mole, right? Like, okay, if you're reporting and on this particular cell block, you're seeing a lot of cases like pop up here from the reporting. Maybe you can tie the dots together and say, you know what, like maybe it was the staffer and they should get the heck out of there, you know? But you can't do that unless you have the data. It's
Yeah, I hear you. I just think it'd be simpler to get right to the monitoring.
I don't disagree with you on some of that. Yeah, I don't
Because,
disagree.
you know, maybe we get 75% of the complaints. I'll bet you we don't even get that. So the other 50% continues on. We think we're helping because we're doing all this reporting, but we're not getting there. It is, so that's where I'm going. Yeah, you get what you measure if you have accurate measurements. But if you don't have accurate measurements, it's just a waste of time.
I think people have been helped by this. I really do,
You're
Kevin.
dealing with people, you're not dealing with widgets. You're dealing with people. And you're dealing with a society.
Training, absolutely.
Well, that's what this
in
works
here,
at,
yeah.
is training.
And that's what,
That's what it works at. And I remember way back, pre-PRIA, I introduced a piece of legislation. It was very clear that there is, when someone is sexually assaulted in corrections, that there is automatically no consent. And that bill didn't go anywhere because no one wanted to deal with it. And that was back in the late 90s. I introduced that bill. We couldn't get it through because people were saying, well, this doesn't happen. And of course, there would be consent in a correctional facility. Well, not when you have a power structure, or not when you have a cellmate that has control over you.
I would just note that within the PRIA standards, there are also elements related to reporting sexual victimization. We know sexual violence is underreported, but these kind of standards in PRIA allow those reporting pathways to be as open as possible, so that people know how to report, know how to be screened, and have immediate and ongoing access to sexual assault crisis services. And so those are part of the building blocks around getting those accurate numbers. And wow, there was one point I wanted to make and it's gone.
Welcome to the world of baby boomers.
so God.
So I want to move this along. So the first part is whether or not, I think there's agreement. And Haley, this is something you may want to pay attention to. We're looking at the first line in section 7, A, deleting the words within available appropriations. Because we're really feeling we got to do this anyway, and it shouldn't be appropriations that determines whether or not we do employee training or inmate education. I mean, this is a requirement of PRIA to do this regardless. So we're going to be taking out within available appropriations.
What do you gotta say about that, Dale?
I'm happy to weigh in if it would be helpful on that language. I mean, there's obviously what presenting concerns are current efforts, because all of that is already funded. But I think actually potentially keeping that language in might encourage future funding should we approach, an era in which that allocation of resources might potentially be cut. Obviously, that's not something that we foresee right now or would go against the department's values and our current practices, but want to ensure that the continued resources are put forward. And that there's no threat of losing that, as that would put the department in a very uncomfortable situation.
If we couldn't carry through a meeting all the standards
Yes,
because the appropriation isn't there.
well, and just the, possibility that the appropriation wouldn't be there in the future.
So one piece that we're looking at that may address your concern for this particular section is that we have a look-see, a review in 2 years. So that might help address taking out the language about the appropriations piece, because in 2 years, it would be, this is 26, 27, 28. So in 28, we look at it again, which you would already have FY 27 in place. You'd already have FY 28 in place. And come January of 28, we'd start working on FY 29. So at least it'd be a track record there, the appropriations, if we could change the language then.
Sure. Yeah, I appreciate that. Because the landscape could be very different in 2 years. Just wanting to ensure that the state continues to prioritize putting resources in this area, even in the event that the federal law should be repealed, which I think, in part the statute does accomplish that, but want to make sure that those resources remain in the department as well, so that we can meaningfully carry out this work.
Which is shall appropriate.
Yeah, right. That might jeopardize the bill somewhat, but
you think?
I appreciate the discussion around this. And I think adding another evaluation in a few years.
Years, because then you've only got one more fiscal year budget to do, because the 27 is already in the works. We know the funding would be there, so then it would only be FY 28 budget.
I think that makes sense, and by then the landscape is likely to have changed
It would be clearer,
on the federal level.
right,
Interesting.
one way or the other.
Well, I didn't say which way.
No, you didn't.
So then, okay, Brian, just on this within available appropriations is what I'm.
Yeah, and just to wrap my head around it, do you have any idea, Haley, what the level of federal funding is? Like, what comes in to do PRIA right now, to put it really
It's all
basically?
state, isn't it?
Yeah,
All
it
state.
is. It's state for the PRIA compliance, and Jen could speak to this much better than I could. The way that it's structured is actually quite interesting, in that if DOC we're not able to certify PRIA for some reason, for that cycle, the money is not taken out of our budget. It's actually taken out of the budget of, I believe last it was the Department of Public Safety. And that's standard for every state around the country. I think that they structured that for like additional accountability with another department having their funds being taken. But even that is a relatively small amount. I think the last time that this occurred, it amounted to around $20,000. And to my understanding, there's no federal funding for Vermont to uphold the standards, but there are resources that go into like the federal auditing process and things of that nature.
Do you have a dollar amount in terms of what we expend for state level?
I don't. I could see if that's something we could quantify.
Because
but
it's
honestly,
put out through everything. It could be
Yeah.
put out through your academy, it could be put out through your medical contract, it could be ingrained in everything.
that's accurate. I mean, obviously we have Jen's position, but we also have PRIA compliance managers. There are, designated people at the facility who are managing the compliance. That tends to be the assistant superintendent, and that's not their only role. And I think Jen would say it's not the responsibility of one person to
Right.
carry out PRIA compliance. It's the responsibility of every staff member.
So it's sprinkled out throughout the whole department. And I think because of having public safety be the fallback to backfill is because in most states, the Department of Corrections is under the Department of Public Safety. It's not under the Agency of Human Services. So that may be more the linkage why it's there.
Yeah, fair enough. I'm not sure whether it's DPS in every state. If that's something the committee wanted to look into, I'd be happy to do that.
But here it would be, yes,
Yes. That's
Sean.
I'm just gonna push back a little bit on it, because I kind of feel like, depending if we're talking about like, you said $20,000. I don't, that's like, gives me pause, because I'm like, wow, that's not a lot of money. And if we're gonna say it has to be paid for out of a $240 million budget every year, you like, if you told me it was $1 million, I still think it should be in there, because let me say that again. It's a $240 million per year in 365 days. That's what we pay you. You know, that's what goes. The taxpayers of Vermont are paying for that. This should be, I'm like, you're hearing a little bit of my Irish come up, but I really feel like it should absolutely be in there. Like I'm even more convinced that within available appropriations shouldn't be in there, but maybe I got something wrong. But I really just feel like, I really feel strongly that we should pay for that.
Completely agreed with you, and perhaps I didn't explain myself clearly enough, but that 20,000 is the amount that's deducted if the state doesn't comply with PREA. So that's not the money that's invested. And like we were just saying, I don't even think we could quantify that, because it should be embedded throughout the department and the responsibilities of every staff member. But the 20,000 is not an investment that goes in for this. And to your point, nor would that be sufficient enough by far. That's merely the kind of penalty for a state unable to certify with the federal standards.
I think I'm being thick. I'm sorry. So, well, all right. So 13 years ago, 2013, Vermont DOC begins implementing these federal standards, and then we achieve certification 2 years later in 15, I guess, because that's what Charlie said. This has always been done entirely with state dollars, right? There's never been any federal money. Is there ever a fight over it? Because I mean, you've just said, like, you can't really look at or quantify all the places where this is happening. I mean, I suppose a couple particular positions could be, but has there ever been a fight about the money going to PREA?
No, because it's funding for, Jen's position, which is a classified state employee position, as well as the responsibilities of other staff members, whether it be there are two kind of PREA compliance managers that sit under Jen, and then there's the designees at the facilities as well. The funding is kind of rolled into their job duties. So no, there is never, to my knowledge, there's not a constant fight over that, because those are embedded into the roles of existing employee positions.
Yeah, I mean, if somebody wanted to mess with or cut PREA at the state line, if there even were such a thing, you're not doing that with money, right? You're doing that with policy. You're no longer enforcing. It's not, you can't starve PREA by not, right? I mean, how could you? Like,
Eliminate the reporting.
But the reporting, they have to do the reporting to the feds. If you're talking about the reporting, Kevin, that's to the feds. They're required to do. That we're not changing. So I'm not sure what you're referring to with the reporting.
That's the only way you would eliminate it. If you're not collecting the data, if you're not reporting on it, that workload goes away. But I thought we were considering asking.
That's a little
reporting to be
different.
the same to the feds and to the state and to us in 2 years.
Right, but we're not at the reporting section of our language right now. They do have to report to the feds. So they're already doing the work.
In a I don't foresee this happening because of the state's values around PREA, and not just the federal law, but what it represents. I think in a potential future, if anyone were to starve the resources for that, it would be through those positions that are existing that work solely on PREA compliance, in which there is 3, Jen and 2 people that sit under her, but I don't foresee that happening given the state's values and ongoing commitment to fulfilling the standards that PREA has set forward, even if that law is somewhat changed at the federal level.
and to the degree that the reporting and we've just been talking about, all of this falls to everyone, right? So I don't know, is there like such a thing as a job description? Like 5% is PREA reporting, or, like, how does this fit into what they do?
Probably not. I think that if you wanted to get a better idea as to how that might play out for positions that are not solely dedicated to PREA, we could probably bring in an assistant superintendent who could speak about how that compliance rolls into their existing job duties. I think that would probably be the best person to represent what you're getting at, but I don't know that it exists in anyone's.
Yeah, so my impression is that it is not onerous on any given one individual employee, but I don't know that.
I think it's pretty onerous on the assistant superintendents, but again, it's not solely their responsibility, although they do have a lot of work in that area. I know it does take up a lot of time, just as part of the duties of that role, as they typically serve as the kind of point person for that facility for compliance.
Okay, thanks.
So are we still at the point as a committee to delete within available appropriations? Okay, so then the next question is actually listing out the standards and statute. And I think in this whole context, with tying it to January 1st, 2024, and listing out the standards in statute, I think the committee feels, yes, we can do a review of this in 2 years.
Mhm.
So with that being in place, where are people with actually putting the standards in statute?
Charlie convinced me.
Yeah.
Oh, yes.
Yes.
I think James was, and then we've got 2 that are not. Okay, so we'll keep that in statute. Standards and statute. And then let's go to the report to us on January 15th, on or before, and every year thereafter. DOC would submit a report to us. And what would be in that report? Because the version that we have before us just says they're going to report back to us, and we're not clear what they're going to report back. In the bill that is drafted that we went through yesterday, we listed 3 things that they should report back: training provided to staff, number of sexual assaults and types of sexual assault reported, and how many reports of sexual assaults were investigated and the outcome. And the testimony we received from the department was that it was quite onerous and time consuming. So the draft that's before us eliminates that. So if DOC is to do a report back to us, what do they need to report on? Do they just report on what they currently need to report to the feds on PREA compliance? Or do we just leave it at that and be clear in language that that's what the report needs to entail? Or do we add more items to that? Ooh, Sean.
Haley. So what do you guys compile every year? And what can you share with us of sexual violence? Like, what do you got? What do you have by the end of the year?
That is such a good question for Jen.
Okay.
I am happy to reach out
Okay.
to her.
That's fine.
Have her
That's good.
send that information over.
That would be super helpful.
Would they be available tomorrow?
Jen.
Jen and Josh and the commission?
Well, I know that Josh is going to be here this afternoon.
okay.
And we'll check with Jen. The commissioner's not here this afternoon.
He's not here, but we really need, because we're getting this bill out. We really need DOC. And we also need WellPAC in the room.
Yeah, and I think we're working on that right now.
That's really important to have WellPAC.
Yeah, I sort of agree with what you're thinking, Chair. It's almost the act of the annual report that's as important as anything. Because if it gets it on the legislature's radar, it's going to be noticeable if it disappears to some extent on the federal level, right? So just getting in the habit of checking in with existing data, I don't think they need to do any more work than just do what they're doing with the feds. It's what,
Correct.
Yeah.
And we could also subject this report to the review. In 2 years, you look at this whole section, you look at 2 years.
Agreed.
So am I hearing that the report back to the legislature would be the same report that DOC submits to PREA?
Yeah.
Okay, so we would need language to make sure that that's what we're looking at, because you can't just say they shall annual report and it's kind of blank in terms of what they're gonna read. Okay, so we go with the version that does not list out additional information.
But I still got Sweeney's question too, about what's, you know,
What's in the report?
yeah.
And I don't know if what is posted on the DOC website is exactly the same as reported to the federal government, but I'm happy to send you a link to the aggregated sexual abuse data and analysis, because I actually think it's really insightful. It notes the number of substantiated reports, who was involved in those reports. And I think most importantly, speaking to your questions, it outlines corrective actions that were taken in response to those. And, it can be quite detailed around, reviewing camera placement within communal areas, changing training standards for particular staff. And so I think this really speaks to like the value of PRIA. And so I'll send this link along. Yeah, so take a look.
Anything else? So we've made 4 decisions, took out the appropriations, kept it January 1st, 24, put the standards in statute. And the report would be to the committee. Report would be the report that DOC submits to PRIA, but we want to know what's in that report.
Yeah.
And,
We took out the appropriations.
all right, the appropriate.
And then we have a 2-year review. However, we're gonna phrase that. I don't know if you say it's sunsets. We've got to have a trigger there for the legislature to know.
Yeah.
Does that make sense to folks?
Yeah.
So Hillary will be in this afternoon. I'll give her a heads up on this. Tate and I will talk and can give her a heads up. Yes. Anything else on this right now? So we gotta shift gears a little bit. Do folks want to take a quick 5-minute break?
Yeah, I'd love to.
Okay, take a quick break, folks. Come back. We're gonna talk about and those positions for pretrial supervision being transferred to